live. Hi, Phyllis. Hi, Christina.
Hi.
Hello.
Phyllis, you're never going to let us see you, are you? What's your situation? Why do we only get your ceiling?
It's a different ceiling tonight.
Oh, it's a different ceiling. You just don't want to be seen, isn't it? You like to be the mysterious voice in the internet.
Mm-hmm. That's great fun, actually.
Let's see. I don't need that lecture. And we've got temperature. Okay, so let's start in. I've already got a bunch of questions from people that may or may not come tonight. So we've already got places to go. We've got Kiara, welcome. So who wants, should we just jump right in? So at this point, everybody should be pretty deep in the UMF, depending on how comfortable you may or may not be at this point. But I would assume that that's what most people's... Oh my God, Ruth made it. Hi, Ruth. I just found an article for you, Ruth. I haven't sent it yet. About English kaolins. Oh, Ruth is frozen up. So, I guess I should ask for enthusiasm. Is everybody excited at this point?
Yeah.
Yeah?
Yeah.
It's good.
Of course.
Good. Good. People are liking the information?
Oh, yeah.
So,
Okay,
Definitely.
so who's got the first question? No one? Okay.
Okay, I'll go
Face
first.
contact. Oh, here we are all jumping in at once now.
Okay, go ahead, Christina.
Okay, so I might be a little bit behind because I just got back into town and I'm behind on your lecture, one or two.
That's okay.
But this is kind of perhaps a silly, stupid question, but I'm trying to start plugging in some of my favorite glazes to the UMF, and I can't. They happen to be a frit that I used in Europe, so it's frit 3647, which is of course not a choice within that.
Right. So, let's see. I'm going to share my glaze calculator. Okay, can everyone see the calculator?
Yeah.
Now, let's see if it actually changes as I move the calculator around. Or if it's just going to do the static thing again. Of course, it's not moving. So, we can add materials to the spreadsheet. Okay? The way that it works, it's pretty simple if you're at all familiar with Excel. You just need to get the chemical analysis for it. And Digital Fire, which is a ceramics website, is generally a pretty good resource for getting chemical analysis, even for international materials.
I think I might have already found it on there, even if I recall.
Great.
Yep. Okay.
So to add a material, and Ruth has already figured this out because Ruth is in England. Oh, she disappeared again. Ruth is in England, and I've been working with her about adding some of her materials onto the spreadsheet. The sharing. Okay, I'm going to do something that's going to freak everybody out, but we'll do it anyway because it should give us a live screen. Okay. I know. It's like bad acid all over again. Come on.
Wow, it's the October.
Oh. Okay, come on, open it up. Where is my spreadsheet? It's not that. It's not that. Where'd it go? Hold on, folks, sorry. Here you are. Okay. So, is my spreadsheet now moving with me as I move it up and down?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, great. Okay. So this is the main spreadsheet. If you guys haven't found it, it's in the course document section. Okay? But the way the spreadsheet works is that obviously you enter in the formula and it spits out the UMF on top. The way it actually works is if you have used it or explored it at all, is that if you go over to the right hand just a little bit, you'll find that there's another section that's sort of hidden from view where the actual calculations take place. Okay? And I won't go into all the subtleties of how this works, but basically it looks at what you've got, and then as you scroll down, there's a list of raw materials underneath. Okay? And so if you want to add another material, Christina, do you happen to have the analysis handy?
I don't think I do, but I can look.
Matt, which spread is
See,
it?
just to make sure.
This is on the calculator sheet. You just scroll to the right a little bit.
Which
Okay.
spread is it?
Oh. Christina, what was the name?
Oh, it's a Frit. Oh, I'm sorry. It's 3647.
3647.
Yeah.
So, as a way for everybody to see, if you want
And
to
I
add,
don't have it. It was something else that I wrote down. I don't have the breakdown of
Okay.
that one. It was something else. Sorry.
Hold on. We can see if Digital Fire's got it.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm looking at it right now. I don't see it. They got a 3626.
3647.
47. Yep.
Oh, it had to be a lead. Oh no.
Of course it is.
Is it a lead frit? No.
Of course. And
No, is that even?
it is a lead frit. I'll let
It
you
is.
know that.
Okay.
Yep. Oh yeah.
So, well, that's not the worst thing in the world. I'm just trying to make sure that this is actually
Okay.
it.
Okay.
I mean, when I Googled it, it came up with this Digital Fire reference, but I don't know if this is actually the correct one.
Okay.
So it's okay. So let's put it in there. So just
Okay.
for reference. So if you want to add in a material, you come over. So again, you just scroll over and down, right? So the actual calculations start here, which is on box A1. And again, it does take a little familiarity with Excel, which is boring but amazing. And then if you scroll over, starting at column J and then down, you'll see the list of the chemical analyses of raw materials. To insert a raw material, you click on a row, and then you right-click, and sorry, I'm on a PC, I don't know what it is on a Mac, but you right-click, and then you come to Insert. And as you click Insert, it will drop down the entire menu beneath that box, okay? And so then you can come in here, and you enter the name, which was, what was it, 3647?
Exactly. Yep.
Okay, and then you come back and you.
It's also sometimes known as 10.05, 10.05 sometimes.
Let's see if that comes up. No, nothing off the top.
Okay.
So we'll just go with this one until you
Sure.
confirm that it's the real analysis. So then all you need to do is, okay, so Digital Fire's got the analysis here. It's 65% lead oxide and 35% silica. Now, actually, the version of the spreadsheet that's posted on there actually does not have lead on it, but I can post this version that does. So
Okay.
you find the column that says silica, which happens to be the first column, and you just plug 35 into the box, and then you find the column that says lead, which on this case is the Y, and you plug that in, and it's 65, and that's it. It's done. It's in there. So now all you have to do is scroll over here, come to the drop-down menu, and you scroll in there, and there it is. Okay?
Great. Thank you.
Yep. And so that's all it takes. So like I said, I don't know whether this is posted, but I will go and post this on Blackboard as we speak. In course documents. Okay, who's eating popcorn? Not looking at any of you, guilty party. And then calculators, and there we go. It's already on Blackboard. Okay.
Sure. Thank you.
So, freak out. Wait, stop. Whew, that's intense.
So Matt, once you get that on Excel, or once you download Excel to your phone, how do you get that onto where you can use it on your phone?
It works on the phone pretty much.
But how do you store it? I've got an iPhone, but I'm not. You can tell I have a thick analog accent. I'm not a digital native.
Generally, I think if you because Excel for Office is now free.
Right.
Right, and so I think it just saves. I think Microsoft wants you to create a live account, whatever that is, and I think whatever their cloud service is, and then I believe it saves it in that cloud, or maybe it's OneDrive. I forget. There's so many of these things now.
Matt, I got it to work on Google Spreadsheet.
Mm-hmm.
All of the drop-down works, so we all have Google accounts because we're all on Google Chat right now.
Right. And
I noticed you had that on there too.
Yeah, and it has. Yeah, the older versions didn't work, but they've now updated Google Spreadsheets. I think it even works in Numbers on the Mac, but that one can be tricky. Hold on, I'm just futzing to see. It's asking me to sign in. Hold on. Oh, so like here it tells me that I can, if you have a Dropbox account, it'll associate it with Dropbox.
Well, I've got that, yes.
But I mean, it too blown out. Still can't see it, but it's there on my phone. It looks like the real Excel, and it works pretty well. I mean, I still wish someday I need to find somebody who knows how to develop apps and is willing to work for free to make a UMF app that will actually work. And but I'll have to get Derek at Glazy to work on that. I don't know if he knows apps at all, but he's good with the software design. So
that'd be helpful.
Yeah.
That'd be cool.
So, any other questions?
So when I was doing these calculations by hand, I used your chemical analysis of materials sheet, and a couple things came up. When the numbers were mildly discrepant from some of the ones I think you used in class, or I think they were mildly discrepant from the ones you did use in class. And then second, what about when you have things like the iron and the titanium? When do they become so de minimis that you don't even bother with them in your calculation? Or do they ever reach that point?
Well, okay, so the first question as to variations in chemical analysis. Yes, no matter what you source, there are going to be different chemical analyses. And that's also part of the materials themselves are inconsistent. So it's not about the quality of the chemical analysis. It's just the fact of that they're naturally occurring materials. So as they go through the deposits, the analysis inherently changes. I've never found any reason of concern. Sometimes there can be. For a while, I had a chemical analysis of Gerstley borate that was really not working. And I only determined it because I kept trying glaze tests with it, and they kept not working the way I predicted them. When I went and ran the analysis again and found a new revised analysis, then all of a sudden my glazes started working. So obviously the one I had was inadequate. But for the most part, the small variations in the materials are not going to cause a major problem. So whatever I put in my sheet versus what you've got versus what Digital Fire has. There used to be another resource called Matrix 2000, and that was, that had its own list of chemical analyses, and anybody can get a chemical analysis. All of ours came because Dr. Carty just started sending out samples to, there's a company in Vancouver called Acme, and they just run the chemical analysis for us. It costs, I think it's like $25 a sample. So it's not cheap, and that the resources are out there, but it's pretty easy. As to iron and titanium levels, that is a fantastic question, Phyllis, that I don't have an answer to. If we were talking about clay bodies, I would say that the level is 4%. And that's only because at 4% is the temperature at which clay bodies tend to volatilize, but they behave differently than glazes do. Now, some people with glazes would say 8%, which tends to be the level, 8% by weight, which tend to be the level that you start with Temakus. They tend to have about 8% iron in them, or more. I think it's 8 to 12, and then tea dust goes up from there. This is something that we're still figuring out, is the real answer. You know, the spreadsheet that I just posted, again, hold on for the freak out, sorry. Oops, don't want Word. That this is based on the research I've been working on for a while, where we're actually accounting for iron here and manganese, but it's also experimental because we actually don't know at this point if we should account for FeO, the 2+ iron molecule, differently than Fe2O3. So right now they're both in here, and the same with manganese dioxide versus manganese oxide. You know, that we're still trying to figure out the subtleties of this, and that's something that just with continued testing, eventually we will figure out. You know, if you move to this version, which is the experimental one, it won't kill you to account for the iron, because it is a flux. Iron is definitively an RO flux. The same with the manganese. When it becomes critical, probably 4 to 5%. You know, but let's jump back on this.
4 to 5% as part of that material.
By
whatever
weight.
material it happens to be.
Well, I mean, by weight in the total glaze. So, I mean, if you're working with, say, red art clay is almost 5% naturally. It's 4 point something percent. So if we add in red iron oxide as a material here, let's see, what composition do I have here? Oh, whoops, let's just make that NEFSI again. Okay, so I don't like that at all. Get rid of that. Make this 50. Good enough. Okay, so here's a 0.3 to 0.7 glaze. Clay level's a little low. Okay, anyway, that doesn't really matter. So if we add in 5% red iron oxide to this generic composition, so that takes us down to 0.74, up from 0.72 alkali earth. So 5% red iron oxide by weight changes your UMF by 0.02 RO. Is that substantial enough? Again, I honestly can't say. Just because we haven't studied it, or I haven't come across a study of it to say definitively at this point. Is it worth accounting for? It's not going to hurt. You know, so I guess that's the answer. Yes, maybe, probably, don't know. Okay.
Well, some of them just seem to drop out. I mean, there were so many zeros.
Right.
But I was curious if you had sort of a default number that if you saw it, you just said, it's going to drop out anyway, so don't bother.
I think that's 6 to 8% that you find with a Temaku, because a Temaku tends to be considered fluxed by the iron, that the iron plays an active role. You know, I think that because that's the condition with Temakus, where you get 6 to 8% iron by weight, and then you can no longer fire the glaze in reduction. Sorry, I have a spy. Do you want to come say hello, Munchkin? Yes. Sorry, everybody. He's going to scream into the microphone. Guard your ears. Come on. Okay, calm down. Oh!
Hi.
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 Good. Good.
You're making silly faces.
At you.
At me? Oh.
What did you do for New Year's?
All right. It's time for bed.
I'm going to bed.
Okay.
Good
Night.
Good night. Good night.
Good night.
Good night. Good night.
He's hyped up. Okay. with Temacus, when you get that 6 to 8%, that's the condition where, because Temacus are sensitive to reduction. In fact, well, they're pretty much exclusively oxidation. And we can set that level as relevant because why they're sensitive to oxidation is because the iron disassociates from Fe2O3 to FeO. Okay? And so we know it is sensitive in that concentration at least. Okay?
Okay, for now.
For now.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Next question.
Can I ask? So I put a lot of. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can.
So I put most of my glazes on the unit, and I put Con 6 and Con 04.
Mm-hmm.
Glazes that I use all year long, years. So sometimes the ratio was really high, like 9 point something.
Mm-hmm.
And usually if I go to 04, the silica and alumina really in the corner of the graph, really, really down in the corner. Really,
Yeah.
and so I don't know, I'm trying to adjust them. And also the metal and the earth, most of the time it's 0.2, 0.8.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I just want to know how to look at the graph.
So when you say they're down in the corner, do you mean that they are down in the lower? Hold on, let me see.
Left.
The lower left-hand corner. So they are down here.
Down, yeah. Let's say alumina 0.14 or yeah.
Crisis. Sorry, I can't hear too much of that. Alumina 0.14, so way down here.
Yeah. I don't have now all the details, but yes.
Mm-hmm.
So how to? Yeah. Okay.
And that's pretty standard. I mean, this is what you find, especially at 04 glazes. Okay, when you start to look at glazes at especially 04, what you'll find is that people will do really wild things from a UMF perspective to just get the glaze to melt. So from the last two lectures, right, that we have this condition that there are 3 ways to get glaze temperature down. Okay. There, you can lower the total amount of silicon alumina, which you've got here, or you can alter the flux ratio, or you can introduce boron, and you can do any combination of all 3. Okay? So if you've got a 0.28, and now you're saying 0.2 alkali metal, lithium, sodium, potassium, or 0.2 calcium, magnesium?
Let's look at this one. 0.2 earth and metal. So here I have spodumene and austenite.
But it's 0.2 on the earths or 0.2 on the metals?
0.2 on the metals.
On the metals. Okay, so you've got 2 of those conditions already being used to bring that melting temperature down.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, you've got very low levels of silicon alumina, and you've got very high levels of alkali metal. Okay, so when you say you want to alter the glaze, what do you want to alter the glaze to? What are you trying to get with it?
Like you say, the boron has to be 0.2 and 3.7.
Mm-hmm.
The main, yeah.
Are you trying to use it for a functional glaze or?
Yeah, only functional. Yeah.
Okay, functional. So some of the things that we need to do, okay, to alter a glaze. Do you have the formula on hand?
I have the 0.5. I can give it. Yeah.
Why don't you give me that one, and let's look at the actual formula.
Okay, so it's spodumene 11, silica 20, Wollastonite 20, EPK 20.
Hold on one second. Well, last night was 20.
EPK 20, and 313421, and zinc 8. This is con 6.
Okay.
Now I'm talking con 6.
Okay.
I have another one for con
3134 was how much?
21.
21. And what was the last ingredient?
Zinc.
Zinc. Okay, and what was that? What was the zinc level?
8.
8. Okay. So, okay. Everybody can see the analysis here?
No.
No?
I don't see it.
Oh. Oh. Oops. Stop. Screen share. Okay. Ruth, we will get to your questions. I just see the just saw your message. Okay. No, I don't want to do that. I want to do that. Sorry. Freak out. Okay. Can everybody see the analysis now?
Yes.
No, you have strontium. I didn't say strontium.
Oh, you're right. Take that out. And okay, that normalizes to 100. Okay, so this is the analysis that I've got, okay, and we can break this down by parts because we have to remember, especially when we get under cone 10, we need to start looking at the components of the system as a whole, okay, because now we have to start to think critically about what we are doing to affect temperature. Okay, now ultimately we want to see 0.3 to 0.7, and that the last two lectures have really talked about the glaze durability aspect. In fact, was that today's lecture or Monday's lecture? That was Monday's lecture. Okay.
Monday.
So we know the importance of this flux ratio, and actually something that I can show you guys later is really that the research that I've been doing that I'm going to present at NCECA this year just goes on to confirm at cone 04 how important the flux ratio really is. Okay, so we're at 0.13 to 0.87. So is that terrible? No. It's not ideal, but it's not the worst thing in the world. Okay, it's being sourced from a combination of lithium from the spodumene, okay, and sodium, which is actually coming from the Frit 3134. Okay. We then need to look at our boron level, which is 0.16. Okay, that's coming purely from Frit 3134, and that's actually right on point. You know, we sort of talked about how at cone 6 you want to have about a 0.15 boron level, you know, plus or minus, but that's pretty decent. The third thing that you can do is, again, lowering your silicon alumina levels. Now, her ratio is fine. You know, you're at 9.5 to 1 mostly, and that's not terrible. It's totally adequate. You know, the 7 to 1 notion you have to note is for ideal. But anywhere in there between 5 to 1 and 12 to 1 is okay. If you're over 12 to 1, that's a bit far. If you're under 5 to 1, you're going to get a Matt anyway. You know, the thing to note, and this will come up later with one of the submitted questions, is the upper limits, but this is plenty low. I mean, we're at 0.26 alumina, 2.51 silica. So when it comes back to the question of how to lower the temperature, this glaze is using basically all three methods. Or you could say sort of two being lower glass former levels and boron. The flux level, you'll notice, is actually increased alkali earths instead of increased alkali metals, so that's sort of neutral to negating C. Okay? So then the question becomes, what do you want to do with this glaze, Red?
This is my transparent clear glaze.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so I wanted this to be more, the alkali metals to be 0.3, 0.7.
Mm-hmm.
So I play with this one.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, so if the silica alumina ratio is okay, so it's fine.
Mm-hmm.
I just was worried that it's too high.
Nope, the silica to alumina ratio is fine. The boron level is good.
Yeah.
You know, I would ask about some of these materials. Do you have glaze fit issues? Why do you have spodumene in here, or is it just a glaze that you picked up?
I picked it up. I use it. It's because it's very transparent, and when I use it in dark clay, it's really, it's not milky. It's really clear, transparent. That's why I choose this one.
Okay. And that's a perfectly acceptable answer. And how's the glaze fit? Are you getting crazing with this glaze on your clay body?
I don't think so. I just don't remember now because I have few.
That's okay. Well, I wouldn't be amazed if you don't, for a couple of conditions. I could say you would have a lot of crazing because your alumina level is low. Okay? When our alumina levels are low, this is something we haven't talked about a lot in this class. But did this switch to Stull? Is everybody seeing Stull?
Yes.
Okay. An interesting thing about Stull is that we've got this hatch-marked region which represents crazing, right? And the interesting thing about the hatch-marked region is that it actually represents thermal expansion. Again, this is something we haven't talked about a lot. It comes up a lot in the clays class, but thermal expansion is represented by the hatch marks. Now, what is going on in this area is actually there's slightly higher thermal expansion in these glazes with lower amounts of silicon alumina. And as you go up into the right install, you're actually reducing thermal expansion. Okay, and getting into the subtleties of this could take an entire class, but just make a note that as you go up, you're reducing thermal expansion. So when you're down in the lower corner, you're more likely to get crazing because you have higher thermal expansion. Now the trick is, going back to Vered's formula, can anybody guess, looking at this, why she's actually might not be seeing crazing with this particular formula?
Because of the wollastonite?
Not the wollastonite. Good guess, but not the wollastonite.
But that has talc, right? Or not?
It's a calcium silicate.
Oh.
Is it the boron?
Nope, it's not the boron.
Or I'm sorry, spodumene rather.
The spodumene.
Yeah.
The boron helps, but the spodumene is.
Yeah, I meant spodumene. I just misspoke.
Right. Yeah, and Ruth got it too. It's the spodumene that's controlling. Sorry, I don't mean to freak everybody out. The spodumene has low thermal expansion, so by using spodumene, she's inherently bringing down the thermal expansion of the system. And this is the sort of thing that I talk about, of sort of learning the subtleties of manipulating the glazes, and you all are just at the beginning of sort of learning the subtleties of this and playing with glazes to get them more in line. So when I look at this glaze and say you wanted to bring it into line for a 0.3 to 0.7, okay, I think that that's a fine thing to do. I don't have a problem with it. We may have some tricks because of the fact that we're using spodumene. Okay, because it has so little flux compared to the amount of silica and alumina it has, it might be a problem. But that doesn't mean we shouldn't try it. And what I'd actually say even before that is we could say that the alkali metal level is low, but the same logic says that the alkali earth level is high. Okay, so probably to manipulate this glaze, what I'd like to do is to take down the alkali earths. Now we need to make some mental notes before we do this. Right now we've got about 3 parts calcium for every 1 part zinc. Okay, that's worth remembering because we probably want to try to keep that proportion in line as we start reducing the actual levels. Okay, otherwise our silicon alumina levels will change, but we're going to deal with those last. Okay, so let's alter the flux ratio first by taking down the calcium because it's the predominant RO source. So to do that, we look at our wollastonite. We're at 20% now, and let's just plug in a number. Let's just take it down by 1/4 and take it to 15. Okay, when I take it down to 15, it doesn't make a huge drop. Okay, it went down a little bit, down to 0.85, but not that huge. Okay, Now, the wollastonite, I'm going to do something extreme, and I'm going to take it all out next. But I'm not going to lose all the calcium. Anybody know why?
Again?
Say that again?
Yeah, you took the wollastonite, you say it's 15 now. You want to?
I'm going to take it to 0.
Oh.
Okay? But I've still got a lot of alkali earth. In fact, I've still got a substantial amount of calcium. Can you guess why?
The wollastonite?
No, the wollastonite's gone now.
Is it in the frit?
It's in the frit. Okay?
Oh,
This frit still brings in calcium. So I take out the wollastonite, and now I'm getting much closer to 0.3 to 0.7, right? But some things have changed.
Yeah.
Okay? My boron level has almost doubled. And this is going to happen because, remember, everything is in proportion to the fluxes. So if I change the fluxes, everything else in this glaze is going to change. And so now we have to go through the steps of altering everything to bring it in line. Now, I'm also not done altering because my calcium level has gone down to 0.39, but my zinc level is still at 0.37. So I want to take out a good part of this zinc because I want to try to go back to that 3 parts to 1 part. Okay, so I'm going to take my zinc down next to 2. Okay, so now I am at almost, I probably want to see about 0.13, so that's 3.9. So it's a little bit low at 2. So then I'm going to try it at 3. 0.18 to 0.15. That's not bad. I'm not broken up about that.
Can I ask if this now it's a good 04 glaze?
It's getting towards 04 because this boron level is now super high. Okay, our boron level has almost tripled, but we'll deal with that in a second. We're going to see what we can do with that. But now notice that my calcium to zinc level, it's a little bit high. I mean, I could try 2.5, 0.16, 0.52. So if you triple that, that's 32, 52. So there we go. That's about 3 to 1, right? With my zinc level and calcium levels are now in the same ratio. And again, we're trying to keep stuff balanced between the two. Now, as Red notes, we've got a bunch of variations. Our boron level is through the roof. Our alumina and silica levels are also through the roof. Okay, so what we need to now try is to bring these down, just straight up bring them down. And luckily, we can because we've got a ton of clay in this. Right now, in our normalized formula, we've got 26, almost 27% EPK. And really in a glaze, at over 20%, it's just going to be too thick anyway. So we can cut this in half and take this down to 10, right? And wonderfully enough, when I take it down to 10, my alumina level drops precipitously. I'm now down to 0.4 from 0.6. Now I took clay out, so my silica level's down. My ratio is now changed, but that's all fine. It's not a big deal. We still do have a lot of boron. Might this work at cone 6 with this much boron? Yeah, but it might be pretty runny, okay? So again, what we probably want to do is then come in and try the boron level before we adjust silica too far, okay? We're currently at 32% frit. So again, you just plug numbers and see what it does. So we're at 21, take it down in half again, okay? Take it down to 10, and the boron level came down a little bit, but not that much. Take it down to 5, okay? And now we're getting into much more balanced areas. The 0.3 to 0.7, it's a little bit out of whack, but it's all sort of coming in line. I could take it down to 4. Okay, and remember, don't watch this batch number because this will just confuse you as to what's going on. All the batch number is doing is renormalizing the formula as I'm plugging in numbers over here. Okay? So right now, just keep watching the UMF. Now, I'm back at basically a 0.3 to 0.7. I could tidy this up. Right? My boron level's back where I want it to be. My alumina level is super high. Okay, so again, I need to cut that clay. So cut the clay down to 5. It's not quite going to do it. Cut the clay down to 1 even. And that's still not going to do it. So can anybody tell me what's the wall we've run into?
Oh my God, silica.
The silica what?
No, I look at the 15.23 ratio.
Well, the silica level is high, but that's not the concern. I mean, we can take the silica down. It doesn't really make a difference as to our total bulk of material. This is the balancing game. This is why cone 6 is so tricky, because to get the right balance of a good flux ratio here, along with the correct boron level, becomes very, very complicated. Because to bring in boron, we have to use a frit, and the frits are chemically complex. So they're not just bringing in boron, they're bringing in fluxes, they're bringing in glass formers. It can be fairly tricky. Now, that said, this as a glaze is probably actually pretty functional. Okay, believe it or not. Oh, the zinc level's off. I got to switch that. Sorry. You're right. I forgot to alter the zinc level. So now the zinc level is up. The calcium level is down. So let's take the zinc level down, 0.5. And here's what the contrast we keep ending up with. Now that's too low. So actually at this point, I'm going to go back in. And I know that this is like, what are you doing, Matt? You're acting crazy. But you know that we're going to go back and add in some of the wollastonite again. Okay? So we'll try to add in 5 wollastonite and bring this back to a 0.3 to 0.7. Okay? Now actually that was a bit much. We'll take it to 4. Take it to 3. Okay? And then 3.5. Okay, so now we're almost at a perfect 0.3 to 0.7. Our boron level is exactly where we want it. Now, the alumina level is much higher, but that should be okay. Even fluxing at cone 6, what this tells us is that the rules of Stull still apply as long as you've got an increased boron level. Okay? As long as you've got your boron level at the right amount, then Stull should still apply. So even at 0.45 alumina, this should be fine. Okay? Now our flux levels are balanced. Our boron level is about where we need it to be. Okay? Our zinc level is a little bit off because we added calcium and didn't add zinc. So we could go back and rebalance the zinc. Take that up to 1. And that's 1.5. Okay. And that's even okay. I mean, we can leave it there. Okay, I mean, I could go and tweak this for hours, and you know that you'll all just get more and more confused as I go and tweak numbers to bring everything perfectly in line. The silica to alumina ratio is high, but I can bring down the flint level. I could take that down from 10 to 7, and now we're back at the 9.5 you had. Okay, our alumina level is up, but our ratio is the same. Our flux ratio is brought more into line. Again, I could keep tweaking this to bring this in line, but that's okay. And our boron level has now increased. Okay?
Will this glaze still be the clear glaze that you sort of started with?
Should be. Yeah, because we haven't changed anything inherently. We've got all the same materials, right? We're still on Stull in a perfectly adequate spot. We've got good balanced flux ratios. We've kept the zinc in line with where the calcium was, which would be my one concern with opacity. Zinc can opacify. But yeah, this should perform basically the same as the previous glaze. Okay? Oops. So, and then for an example, actually, I was just opening this one up. So I keep talking about this glaze from a student of mine from last year. Oops, sorry, Kelly. Kelly Justice, who was working with beautiful matte glazes, right? And she had come to me with this formula and said, hey, I've got this problem. This glaze I'm working with is always glossy. It's a matte glaze at cone 6 that always ends up glossier when I fire it hotter. Okay? And to me, I go instant red flags. So she showed me the glaze, which was this. Okay? You know, it looks like a perfectly acceptable. It's got a little bit of a sheen to it. Right? It's a matte glaze. She really liked the color response. She'd worked really hard to get these sort of candy colors that she really, really liked. But the glaze was performing oddly. Okay? So, of course, me being me, I plug it into the calculator, and this is what she gave me. Right? I've got my alkali metal ratio, you know, not unlike what Vered had there, of 0.17 to 0.83. Out of whack. Not necessarily a concern. It's not 0.5 to 0.5. 0.5 to 0.5 scares me greatly. This is okay, but you know, it's not perfect. Her alumina level is 0.36, and her silica level was 2.82, but her ratio is 6.3. So, who wants to identify the warning signs that I saw in this glaze?
Mag carb's water soluble.
Mag carb is not water soluble.
Oh, it's not. Okay.
No, our alkali earth carbonates have exceptionally low solubility. The alkali metal carbonates have high solubility. So looking at this as a cone 6 matte glaze, why would I be concerned?
You don't see.
Who said that?
Your ratios.
Yeah, okay. I don't see.
Who started to say your ratios?
I did. Your silica alumina ratios are not in the matte region. They're in the glossy region.
Ding, ding. Okay? That's exactly what the problem is. My silica to alumina ratio is 6.3. Okay? That cannot be a matte glaze. Right? It can't. That violates the rules of Stull. And what I was talking about in the lecture today is that the rules of boron say that as long as you've got the appropriate amount of boron, Stull still applies. So her flux ratio is not great, but that doesn't bother me. What bothers me is that her silica, her glass former ratio is wrong, and her boron level is very low. And that all makes me think, combined with the notion that this is a glaze that turns glossier when you fire it hotter, says this is just an under-fired gloss, not an actual matte glaze. But she really liked the color response, and as we will talk about in a lecture next week, that color response is based on the ROs specifically. So the magnesium that she's got, the calcium that she's got, and the proportion of those two to each other controls color response. Okay? And again, that's something that'll come up next week, and the subtlety of it. So what I did is I came up with this. Okay? Very, very simply, I took her same ingredients. I attempted to keep their proportion to each other the same as far as the fluxes, but I made it a 0.3 to 0.7. Okay? I brought her boron level up to 0.15, and I made her silica to alumina ratio under 5 to 1. Okay? I also made a second variation where I did the same thing, 0.3 to 0.7, kept her calcium and MgO levels basically in proportion to each other, but I changed her silica to alumina ratio to go even lower at 4.3 to 1. Okay? And what did I get? I got this glaze. Right? A true matte glaze at cone 6. How do I know it's matte? Because it runs. Okay? If the glaze runs in its matte as it's doing here, that's a true matte glaze because it's a gloss base with crystals growing in it. Gloss can run. Under-fired gloss cannot run. Okay? And so these are... This is the glaze that she got out of it. A true matte glaze at cone 6. Okay? And then to carry it one step further, I also said, well, if you've got a matte, why don't I just give you a glossy glaze? So this was the gloss glaze that I came up with. And again, this confirms that this was a matte glaze because literally the only thing that I did between the matte glaze and the gloss glaze. Here, I'll skip back and forth. Okay? The glossy glaze, all I did was increase the silica to alumina ratio. I took it into the glossy region, right? Kept the boron level the same, the flux is the same, the ratio of the ROs the same, right? And then, wait for it, oh my God, super gloss, right? You know, glossy all day long. So actually, do I have, where's that one? Hold on. So, and because Kelly just makes great pots as it is, right? Can everybody see? So, this is the same glaze, just colored orange. I mean, you can see the gloss on there. You can all see yourselves in the reflection. High gloss, beautiful color response. Here's that pot, right? Beautiful matte glazes. These two glazes are the same glaze. I mean, different colorants, obviously, but all it is that this one has got a little bit more silica. Because a true matte glaze, if you, God, come on, focus. A true matte glaze, if you add extra silica to a true matte glaze, it will go glossy. That is what Stahl tells us. And it doesn't matter at what temperature. This is cone 6. As long as those boron levels are the same, focus. As soon as I want to show an example, I go out of focus. Okay, as long as you keep your ratios the same. Oh, come on. Right? It doesn't want to show off the beautiful pots. Okay? Right? That it can run, it can break. I mean, look at, I can see you guys in the shine of the gloss right there. I mean, it's crazy. And literally, chemically, these two are the same. Okay? And all it takes, whoops, cancel. I have to change that, and then screen share, and then freak everybody out. Oh, let's do this. Okay, oops, wrong one. Okay, right, and again, that the glossy glaze, I'm keeping the same fluxes, mag carb and whiting, the same boron source. She's got a little bit of 3124 and a little Gerstley. When I'm altering a formula, I try to change as little as possible. Okay? So the same with Vered's formula here. I didn't change the ingredients. Like, I probably wouldn't use wollastonite if it was me. I'd just use straight up whiting, but her formula uses wollastonite, so I'm not going to touch it. Right? You know, just trying to keep everything consistent, but bringing the numbers into line. And Stahl still applies. This is what's so crazy, you guys. Stahl still applies, no matter what. And the data that I found is, you know, I think I showed this to you before, but I know this doesn't look like anything, but, you know, that these, I've recreated Stahl at cone 04 with the appropriate levels, and I still get true matte glazes and true gloss glazes. Stahl even applies at cone 04 with that 0.5 boron level. I know you can't see it. We tried this last week, but I've got these true matte glazes, you know, high quality gloss glazes. The whole thing still applies at every temperature as long as you've got the appropriate boron level, which I'm defining through this map. Through this map, right? So this is giving us predictive levels of boron based on temperature, right? And this is a huge deal. Pick a temperature, find its place here, and then correlate that to a required boron level. So if you want to work at cone 1, you want to work at cone 08, you want to work at cone 4, you want to work at cone 9, doesn't matter. It all still applies. Stahl continues to be the same. It's all good. Like, that's a big deal. And that was a complete tangent to say that Vered's glaze should be the same. Yeah, I mean, write it down, try it. You know, it might be a little bit touchy because of the spodumene. I mean, I'm pretty comfortable with this variation. Now, that said, the one challenge she might face is sometimes if the original glaze is radically different than what you're trying to achieve, you might get a different performance. But I don't see any major flags that say to me, oh, this will be completely and utterly different. I'd say that that's probably pretty in line. Her alumina level's a little bit higher. I might spend some more time tweaking to get this exactly 0.3 to 0.7. I might spend some more time tweaking to get the calcium and the zinc balanced completely. But, you know, it should be the same nature of the glaze. Because I've kept the fluxes the same, I've kept them in proportion to each other, but brought them in line from the limits I want to see from Stull's research and from my research. Okay? Makes sense? I can't see head shakes. Okay, I'll stop, bro. Oh, was that just me talking? Oh, man. Oh, I didn't share it? Oh, shoot. Whoops. I was just pointing at spreadsheets, and you all were staring at stupid me. Okay. Any other questions?
Yeah, so I, at my school, I took the pictures of their glaze is that they have made up in barrels, and I plugged them into the UMF calculator, and I found that some of the cone 6 glazes had reversed RO to R2O ratios.
Yep.
Now, they say that all of the cone 6 glazes in the studio aren't food safe. They do put that directly on the label, which I think is good. But my question is, is there an issue with that glaze performing in general because the ratios are so wacky?
It depends on what you define as perform. Will the glaze fire the way you want it to? Probably, unless there's a lot of those alkali metal carbonates, soda ash, pearl ash, and lithium carb.
Yeah.
Those could change performance, right? That could be an issue. Will the glaze work? Yes. Is it a durable glaze? No. Is it a high quality glaze? No. Okay, it's all of those things that I don't really like.
Yeah. Here, I pulled one of them up on my screen share if you can see it.
Yeah. Okay, I've opened it up.
You know, it's like silica alumina ratios are crazy. Its alkali metals are way high. Wow. But this isn't the worst one.
Well, hold on. I like the fact that I'm watching everyone's faces on the screen get depressed looking at chemistry. Okay, can I say that I find that exciting? Okay, the desperation and despair is actually encouraging. Okay, yeah, the numbers aren't good. Your alumina levels are crazy low. Your flux ratios are way out of whack. Your silica alumina ratio is off the charts. Yeah, I don't like it. You know, I think I may have already told this story, but I had a student who took this class last year, Sue, and she went and got a job as a studio tech at a college near her.
Yes, I'm feeling like your student. I work for this studio.
Right.
Like, I'm asked to mix some of these glazes.
You cannot challenge the people that run the studio. You can encourage them to. You can share your knowledge. Encourage them to take the class.
My professor's like, yeah, I took Glaze Calc at Alfred, and frankly, it wasn't interesting. And I was like, okay.
What year was that?
Wow.
I don't know. Probably 20 years ago, 15 maybe.
Who's your faculty member?
Sarah Lindley.
Do I know her?
She works at K College in Kalamazoo.
I don't know if I know her. I don't think she took it from me.
She claims not to know you. So.
Okay, then she didn't take it from me. And I will say that in my blurry state, apparently I'm drunk. My webcam thinks I'm drunk. Even from me, you know, from years of research, that The people that preceded me, Val Cushing was a genius. Daniel Rhodes is my favorite resource, and a lot of the information they had was bad. It was not real, and it was not updated, and that's why I'm here now. That's teaching the new understanding. And a lot of people do think it's boring, and I hope all of you guys think it's exciting. I mean, that's the response I've generally been getting, that you're learning a lot. I
mean, at least she pointed me back to Alfred.
Right. And so, now you're here. Now you have the burden of knowledge. It's now going to be your job to fix all their glazes, which is, a Sisyphean task. I don't know if it can be done. Some glazes, the other catch is some glazes are really based on having these crazy ratios.
Based meaning what? Like their color performance or their performance in general?
Their color performance specifically. We'll talk about next week when we do the colors lecture that I was just mentioning that color response is generally based on the RO level. That is actually not true. The thing I just taught you half an hour ago, I was lying to you. But it's because it's based on whatever the predominant flux is. Okay? In the vast majority of our glazes, the predominant flux is the RO. But if, like that case, the predominant flux is R2O, you're going to lose that color response because it was based on R2O being the dominant flux. And so I don't know whether that glaze could be saved.
Okay, I have a tangent question to that. So, I was told by the same professor that if I take one of these glazes that she's said are not food safe at cone 6, and I put on top of it a cone 6 clear glaze that was manufactured, that like comes out of a tub, that it will be food safe. I don't understand how the layering of glazes works and how that maintains its safeness or not.
I mean, layering is always one of those things that comes up, and there is no great explanation, and there's no way to study layering because it's literally the infinity of glazes contrasted to the infinity of glazes, and then the thing in between. What I would say, the best we can do to analyze layering is to take the analysis of glaze A, look at that, consider it, look at glaze B, consider that, and then I would enter both of them onto the spreadsheet as a single glaze and see what that comes up with. And then you have to consider the relationship between A, the relationship of B, and C, and then consider what's on the bottom, what's on the top, what's in the middle. How it's going to react, I mean, there's just an infinite number of variables, and maybe someday I'll get into studying it, but I was discouraged studying color for 15 years until I finally went and did it, and the number of variables in studying color are mind-boggling, much less layering glazes.
So you would say that you can't just assume that you're going to put a food-safe glaze on top of a non-food-safe glaze, and therefore it is safe.
Well, so you haven't been here for all the talks, and I don't know if you've watched them, but
I have watched them all.
Okay, my basic thing though on food safety is I don't actually care. There is nothing poisonous besides Christina's evil lead.
I make sculptures,
I know, it's true. You're not from a health and safety standpoint, by the United States government, no matter how much depending on how much you care about that, the only things that are actually poisonous are lead and cadmium. And lead is used all the time. Basically, every restaurant you eat out at to this day is using leaded glazes. But they are well designed and they are well fired and checked and tested. Okay? So lead can be used with exceptional responsibility. And it works very, very, very well.
So if you're not concerned with food safety, you talk about durability all of the time. What is the difference between it being food safe and it being durable?
Durable is what I am much more concerned about, absolutely, because durability is the realistic application of studying food safety, whether or not a glaze will dissolve, right? Durability is the resistance of a glaze to degradation. Okay? And non-durable glazes dissolve. I am concerned that this glaze dissolves. I'm not concerned that's with someone eating it because it dissolves. Right?
Because its components aren't
toxic.
Poisonous. Yeah.
But, okay, here's the thing. Again, knowledge is power as the burden you all now carry. The thing is that if you solve this problem, you solve a vast number of other problems in glazes that people aren't thinking about. Okay? Besides durability, you're dealing with glaze fit. You're reducing crazing and dunting and crawling and soluble materials using carbonates and all of these types of things. You get rid of all this major raft of problems by keeping glazes in the durable range. Okay? And so it really just, by keeping things functional, things are inherently better. So is putting a clear glaze on top of that other glaze okay? Yeah, it actually probably is. I think that's a dumb and lazy answer, though.
I would agree.
Okay? It's the classic, sorry everybody for slandering you or your friends or your faculty, but it's just one of those half-assed ceramic answers that you hear all the time. When you could design something that is spectacular and durable, or you can just sort of go, oh yeah, just throw a clear glaze on top of it and it'll be okay. Can she get away with it? Yes. Don't ever let her see this video.
Yeah.
You know, I would rather see glazes with a better chemistry in there. Because those, even if you put another glaze on them, it's going to change the inherent performance of that glaze.
Yeah. I think I see her being like, well, the Cone 6 clay she only uses in her hand building class. But she doesn't limit her hand builders to making sculptural things. So then if her sculptors, or her hand builders, excuse me, make something functional, I think she just has to have a way that they can sort of glaze it that might make it okay. I think it's still this like half-assed sort of answer, but I think her priority is the sculptors.
Yeah.
She doesn't limit it to sculptors.
And that's fine. I mean, I say, I think in the first lecture, if you're making sculpture, do whatever.
Yeah.
Do whatever gets you the
So
effect.
that crazy glaze is fine for sculpting.
Yeah, for sculpting, anything's fine. I mean, as long as, don't put it in the dishwasher, but we don't put sculpture in the dishwasher for the most part. Because it will literally, this is my other one. This was basically this glaze in the dishwasher, right? That's what the dishwasher does to pour glazes. And, this is the whole complicated thing, because even, if you see me online, or if I'm talking to somebody who's not one of you all, you will hear me say food safety, food safety. I won't use the word food safety. I will talk about durability. I will discourage people from doing what I would call dangerous behavior with their glazes. But it's only because I want to guide them to doing something sensible. Because, that this pot from Kelly is still a functional pot, and if they're doing function, then they need to be concerned with that. If it's sculpture, knock yourself out. But there's going to be a raft of technical issues, Dunting is a major technical problem where your clay literally cracks and breaks because you put a glaze with too much undissolved silica on an underfired clay. And that glaze will literally break the clay apart. That's a real problem, from having an improperly formulated matte glaze, even in sculpture. Right? It will literally shatter sculpture because most sculptures are underfired, or a lot of them are. Unless you're working in something cone 6, cone 10, vitrified. Oh, you look depressed. That's good. Did I answer your question?
I want to study layering. That's what I want.
Okay, go for it. Send me your results. I'll work with you if you want.
Will you be my advisor from afar?
Sure, I'm fine with that. And anybody who wants to do sensible research, I am down with all that. Hold on, I'm reading Ruth's comment here. Find the glaze user who hates the glaze the most and offer to help them to come up with your own side project and accidentally show them yours is better. Yeah, that's true. And the lithium is antidepressant. They used to always joke about Alfred that there was secretly lithium in the water just to be able to deal with living in Alfred. I don't know. It's still depressing to live in Alfred. Christina was a grad student in Alfred, so she lived there for 2. She put in her 2 years. It's depressing enough as it is. So are there any other questions?
I have a kind of a funny fact that I remember when you started talking about boron.
Mm-hmm.
The only time I have studied calculation before was with this teacher in Venezuela who worked mostly with cone 10 glazes. And he told us that in order to make them work for cone 6, all we had to do was add 10 to 5% Gersley borate.
They were importing Gersley borate?
Gersley borate was big in Venezuela when I started doing ceramic. So it was like the big thing. And then it disappeared.
Yeah. Well, now it's back again.
Yeah.
We can look at that. Hold on. Let me make up a glaze real fast. Right. Hold on. I'm just in my spreadsheet. 30. 25. Okay. So here's a fake glaze that I made up. And I'll share it here in 1 second. Okay. Okay, so here's my fake glaze that I just made up. Frit 30 or Nefsi, whiting, flint, and EPK. Okay, so we've got a 0.3 to 0.7. We've got a silica level of 1.77, an alumina level of 0.31, a silica to alumina ratio of 5.69. It's not great, but I can increase the flint here to 10, 20. 19, 19.5. There we go. Okay, so 3 to 1, 7 to 1, good enough. So you said adding in 5 to 10% Gersley borate?
Yes.
So let's find Gersley on the list. Is everyone looking at the calculator now? Can you see it?
Yep.
Okay,
Yeah.
so 5% Gersley borate. No, that's not going to work. Okay. Now, the 5% Gersley borate did not particularly change our flux ratio, and that's okay. Even though Gersley has sodium and calcium, the fact that there's sodium and calcium pretty much keeps it in line. Didn't really change our silica or alumina level, but the boron level is not sufficient. But let's take it to 10%. 10%, we're halfway there. Again, the flux ratio is starting to alter. It's getting a little heavy on the calcium, but it's still okay. But again, that this is 10% normalized. Let's take it up to 10% by weight. So we'll take it up to 12. Let's take it to 13 just to be generous. I mean, would this melt? Yeah, it's probably within the margin of error. It would probably actually work okay. The flux ratio is not that bad. The alumina silica levels are actually reduced slightly. So, yeah, I mean, that kind of works for the most part. It's not terrible. I'd rather see a higher boron level, like 20%, 15 now by weight. That I'm happier with. Still basically at 7:1, basically at 0.3 to 0.7. I could dial this back a little bit, but for the sake of your argument, yeah, it's not the worst thing in the world. The catch is, though, okay, here's the thing about doing that, and here's the problem with doing that, okay? So I just said to you that RO controls color, and then I told you I was lying, and then I said that dominant flux controls color. Well, I was also lying, because when you introduce boron then controls the color. And I discovered even this one myself last year. I was working on a glaze for Linda Sikora, and I had this amazing, like, electric blue. This isn't the one, but this is sort of the shade, like a really vibrant sort of electric blue. And it's a zinc-based blue. And she loved the color, and she just wanted it, like, super glossy. I couldn't change the silicon alumina levels. They were already bottomed out. I couldn't change the flux ratio. So I said, oh, well, I'll add in boron. As soon as I added in the boron, it changed the color response. Okay? Because boron then becomes the dominant fluxing material. And you can't beat that. Okay? And it's the problem of, oh, hey, can I turn my cone 10 glaze into a cone 6 glaze? Sort of, kind of, not really. You're not going to get the same color response, which, again, we'll get into color responses deeper next week. Okay? So can you mimic the texture? Yes. But can you get exactly the same color response? I mean, the blue is still going to be blue, but it's not going to be the same shade of blue or vibrancy of blue, any of that type of thing. Ruth, I'll get to that question in 1 second. But, you know, so adding in that much scarcity borate, yeah, I mean, it sort of works. Okay, so question from Ruth on mute. Her clay supplier said he expects the clay to have 3% absorption to a top recommended temperature of cone 9. Does that mean it doesn't contain enough silica to ever vitrify, however high it fires? Well, it's not that it doesn't contain enough silica, it has too much silica. And the silica is inherently raising the melting temperature of the clay body. And again, in clays, of course, it's a huge subject, but clays become a much greater balancing act between the flux and the quartz becomes a balancing act when we're talking about clay bodies. And it's very easy to change the firing temperature of a clay. You increase your flux and decrease your quartz. What Ruth is talking about is she and I have been having a discussion. It's gone on in this a little bit, but that, you know, that this whole thing about cone 6, and that clay manufacturers say that 6% or that 3% absorption is good enough at cone 6. And actually, I will show you guys a slide from my clay class, a peek into the clay class. Hold on, let me find it. Clay's lecture. Firing 2. Part of this I had shown you guys last week, but here's a compare and contrast. So again, part of my cone 6 conspiracy theory is that the companies are telling you that cone 6 works because, oh, hey, we can change the, oops, sorry, that's what I'm looking for. We can change what absorption is. Can everybody see this PowerPoint sheet with a turquoise box and a yellow box?
Yes.
Okay. So the turquoise box is a cone 6 clay that I'd shown you before. And these first 4 samples are exactly the same clay in exactly the same firing. And there was a piece put on the floor of the kiln, on the bottom shelf, on the middle shelf, and on the top shelf. And what I got from this one clay, fired to the recommended temperature from the manufacturer, were absorption rates between 3 and 1.8. Same kiln, same firing. Okay? I then took that same clay and fired it fully at cone 5, 6, and 7, and I got absorption rates between 6.1 at cone 5 and 0.72, none of which are considered vitrified. To vitrify a clay, it needs to be less than 0.5%. So this cone 7 is still under fired. On top of it, the density is low, but I'm not going to go into density. Here is my cone 6 clay. That is a different formula, but I use a small amount of frit. I use 3% frit to get my vitrification down. At 1200 degrees, which is roughly cone 3 or 4, I'm already vitrified. I'm also vitrified at 1250, which is just over cone 6. I'm also vitrified all the way to cone 10. I'm even vitrified at 1350, meaning that my clay, has an over 150 degrees C, over 7 cone firing range, and is mature at cone 6. And all I did is that this is my normal porcelain recipe, and I took out 3% feldspar, and I added in 3% frit 3124, and it's vitrified like a beast. Because, I was talking about solving clay problems to remove future, getting flux ratios balanced to remove potential future problems. This is the same thing. This is the problem with cone 6 clays now. Because you're going to get different absorption, you're going to get different levels of melting, you're going to get different glaze fit, you're going to get potential issues with breakage and dunting, all sorts of crazy things. Because all the clay manufacturers are selling you a lie, and I'm the bummer here.
Matt, what's that clay body like in terms of its range? When does it start to slump?
My clay?
Yeah. Never?
I mean, it'll slump if you fire it to 1400 C.
Okay.
But you're not going to fire to 1400 C.
Right, but you're like really solidly vitrified without collapsing.
Yeah. Well, now slumping does have, there are actually 3 ways a clay can slump. And the one way that it is still susceptible is geometry. Okay? All clays are susceptible to slumping based on geometry, meaning if you've got too great of a span and it's not supported, basic arches and supports. If you've got too much of a span and that, if you've got like an appendage out like this, cantilevered, that clay body is still going to become soft in the firing, and it can still slump, no matter what. But the other 2 types of slumping, yeah, that beats that. It's and the clay companies don't want to do it because they don't want to spend the money for the 3% frit, because that's $3 a pound, or $3 for every 100 pounds out of their pocket, and they'd rather keep that $3 and sell you crap. I hate being a cynic, you guys. I know I do it all the time, and it's like my life, but I don't actually like doing it. I want to be an optimist. But Ruth, for a cone 9 body, actually, I will say that's actually even worse. For a cone 9 body, that's really bad, because at cone 9, cone 10, it's really easy to vitrify, or to make a composition that vitrifies. They've drank the Kool-Aid. Well, I'm waiting for Ruth's response. It's the favorite? Yeah. No. I mean, we all know we can't account for taste. I mean, terrible movies are popular. Olive Garden's popular. Ugh. Well, yeah, but that's... Well, now, I have to add, did you add the Loverly? Are you just trying to be the My Fair Lady of our class? Loverly. Loverly. Or is that how you people actually talk? You people. You Brits. Can't type. Well, that doesn't mean it's not workable, because the thing about clays, right, and we don't have a ton of time to go into this because there's actually a bunch of more glaze stuff I want to talk about. The thing about clays is that clays are actually a 2-part system. The clay, the plastic clay itself, controls how well it performs in the studio. The feldspar in the quartz controls how it works in the kiln, and they're actually almost completely divested. Okay, you can control green performance. You can have great green performance and terrible fired performance, but you can alter the fired performance without affecting the green performance. And it's a very simple thing to do, but I don't know. I have to watch myself. This stuff's going on YouTube. I could get sued for slander. I don't say anybody's names, but like.
So I have one more question again.
Okay.
And maybe I'm just talking too soon. I was down to your Monday lecture, which was on my end really depressing again.
Oh,
and
stop.
I'm serious. So, I mean, maybe I'm talking too fast. Is Cone 6 going to become a thing when you're done, or should we consider going to Cone 10?
No, I think you can totally consider staying at Cone 6. I think that you have a good knowledge base. It's going to take more experimentation on your part. It's going to take a lot of experimentation on your part to dial things into place, to know what works and what doesn't work. No, Cone 6 can totally be a thing. Don't be depressed. So what, you saw Monday's lecture but not today's? Yeah, today's lecture should hopefully bring hope back to you, because I talk about, what you can do at Cone 6 to make, wonderful glazes,
Yeah. So
durable
that's Cone
glazes.
6?
This is Cone 6.
Okay.
Okay? Her clay body is for shit, but that's a different topic. I'm kidding. Her clay body is much better than it was. We worked on her clay body a lot. How do you test? Ruth is asking, how do we test our glazes without a gloss meter? That you use the UMF. The UMF will be your test, because I am telling you as your teacher, and hopefully you've seen enough data, and will continue to see the data, that the numbers don't lie. Okay? I've never found a case where if you can get yourself in a place where you're comfortable with understanding the system, that the numbers hold true. Okay? So, I mean, I can... I've showed you guys this one before, but... so this is... I still don't have the PowerPoint over done yet, but this is my NSECA research from this year, right? And this is what's so incredible. Okay. This document, this graph, because you all know I love my charts and graphs and spreadsheets because I don't have a life. Okay. What this is telling us, right, the short version is that glazes with a 0.3 to 0.7 flux ratio, which the yellow line is, okay, and appropriate amounts of boron will be more durable than the best Cone 10 glazes. Okay, this glaze is zero durability. So this is the same that I talked about with the dishwasher testing. These were 0.4 glazes with different flux ratios. So the orange line is 0.7 alkali metal, 0.3 alkali earth. The silver line is 0.5 to 0.5. The yellow line is 0.3 to 0.7. And the blue line is 0.1 to 0.9. Then as we go up the y-axis, this is degradation. So this is zero degradation along the dashed line, right? We go up to 25%, down to negative 15%. I could explain. I'll explain that later. And going across the x-axis is increasing amounts of boron. Okay, from 0.1 to 0.55. Now, what we find is that when you have too little boron at cone 04, which is under 0.4, you get massive amounts of degradation. Can anyone tell me why? No guesses?
It's underfired.
It is underfired. Second gold star. Okay? The glaze isn't melted, so of course it's going to fall apart because it's undermelted. This is the problem with fake matte glazes. Okay? Because fake matte glazes are just underfired. They are breaking down, and they've got the holes that can create bacteria, and you get glaze fit issues, and they're just terrible. But here's the cool part. Above 0.4 boron, we are getting sufficient melting, which is what this line is. At 0.3, it is underfired. At 0.4, it is perfectly fired. And what this shows is that as soon as the glaze is well fired, we get zero degradation. In fact, it actually went negative because the glaze got slightly glossier because we washed away any little junk that was on the surface when I took the first reading. Okay? The glaze is literally perfect after 50 cycles in the dishwasher. Now, when we look at a 0.5 to 0.5, what's quite interesting is that at 0.5 to 0.5, which is the silver line here, it will melt with 0.3 boron, but it also has 10% degradation. And we get 10% degradation no matter how much boron we add into it. The high flux ratio is going to be terrible no matter what you do to it. It is going to fall apart, and that equals poor durability, which, like I said, we could translate to poor food safety. At 0.7 to 0.3, the orange line, even at 0.4 boron, we're at over 20% degradation. At 0.5, we still get 20% degradation as we increase boron. The degradation is still terrible when you have high flux ratios. When you have low flux ratios or ideal flux ratios, it's perfect. It's better than perfect. Cone 04 is better than cone 10 because the boron makes the glaze that much better just by having its presence. Okay? This is a huge frickin' deal. Like, huge. And I'm trying not to swear since I sound like a second grader.
Okay, now you just said the flux ratio, but it's not really the flux ratio. It's your R2O to RO ratio, right?
That's the flux ratio.
But you talk about the flux ratio in comparison to silica and alumina, so you are using the term differently in two places. So it's the ratio of fluxes to each other.
When did I say silica to alumina? I did not. If I did, I did not mean to say that.
You didn't in this particular talk, but in your lectures, you talk about the flux ratio when you would normalize it to 1 mole. That's the flux ratio to the silica and alumina. To everything else.
No. Silica and alumina are in proportion to the fluxes. The flux ratio is an internal value. Okay? Because your fluxes are always going to equal 1, inside that 1, you've got a proportion of alkali metal to alkali earth. Okay? That is the flux ratio. Silica and alumina is just looking at all of my fluxes together, and then silica and alumina in proportion to all the fluxes together. Does that make sense? Scott, you're biting your nails.
No, but if you pull up that graph again, you've got this gray line. Where is it?
The gray line here.
Yeah, now the way I read that, it's a ratio of the R2 to RO. The flux itself compared to the rest of the glaze, that ratio is staying the same, is it not?
The flux itself... Well, the UMF puts all the fluxes in proportion, right? That is the inherent nature of the UMF. All of these equal 1. Okay? In the UMF, all of your fluxes are going to be totaled together, and your silica and alumina are going to be put in proportion to that. And that's the one other part of this that I didn't say, is that every single point here, every single one, has exactly the same amounts of silica and alumina.
How did you increase boron without increasing those?
You just use different sources. I used a combination of Guernsey borate, Cadi-Cal, and Frit 3124.
Okay. So you changed your other materials a little bit so that your chemical composition stayed the same.
But in glazes, for the most part,
it doesn't matter.
It does not matter. The same thing, like I said, with red. I probably wouldn't use wollastonite because it doesn't matter. Silica will do exactly the same thing in a glaze. I'm sorry, calcium and silica will do the same thing in a glaze. Okay, so yeah, this has nothing to do with changing the amount of fluxes. Everything is in proportion to the fluxes. And inside that ratio, there is the ratio of R2O to RO. Okay, and that's what this is saying. At 0.3 to 0.7, which is our ultimate flux ratio at any temperature at all, okay, that when you've got the prescribed amount of boron based on that map I showed you a few minutes ago, you get incredible glaze durability. And we see that at cone 04 here. We also see that at cone 6 here. Okay, this is telling us literally exactly the same thing. These two graphs tell us exactly the same thing, that at cone 6, with the prescribed amount of boron, our durability is at our degradation is at 1.7%. Okay, by firing this glaze with 0.15 boron. Okay, so at cone 10, the same glaze, 0.3 to 0.7, that's up here, 0.3 to 0.7 with a 7 to 1 silica to alumina ratio, has 2.8% degradation. So the cone 10 glaze has a very minor amount of degradation. The cone 6 glaze has an even lower amount of degradation. And cone 04 essentially has 0 degradation statistically. Okay? That's a huge deal, especially when you combine it with, showing that you can create true matte glazes at cone 6 or true matte glazes at cone 04, that we can define durability based on the UMF composition, okay? That we can define temperature based on boron level. So when I say, to Ruth's, going back to Ruth's original question, how do we judge these things without a gloss meter? The UMF tells you all of this depending on your ability to look at a formula and analyze it based on based on chemistry and firing temperature. And I'm just going to be blurry for the rest of the night.
Where does fit come into that? Can you also glean information about fit when you look at those?
You mean like crazing? Or shivering?
Like crazing, but more specifically, one of my questions is, why is it so difficult to get fit with bone china?
Well, it comes down to the thermal expansion question. Okay, and bone china is going to be a trick, but have I ever measured the thermal expansion of a bone china? I don't believe I have. I'd have to find the numbers, but going back to Stull, and we were talking about just this earlier, okay, right? When we go back to Stull tells us what thermal expansion will be, right? Because this crazing region defines the relationship between the clay and glaze, okay? And crazing, which we haven't done glaze flaws yet, I think that's Friday. When we talk about glaze flaws, we'll talk about the fact that this is a clay and glaze problem. Okay, it is not one or the other. It's a problem that we tend to solve with the glaze because it's easier to change a bucket of glaze or get rid of a bucket of glaze that's not working for us rather than getting rid of, a ton of clay. Okay? So what Stull tells us is if you can plot the point on here, right, that what you can do is, keeping things balanced, you can move away from the crazing region. Now, the actual relationship is slightly complicated because it comes down to this relationship about thermal expansion, which we don't really go into extensively in this class. We talk about it a lot in the clays class because it's just more to talk about, and we don't have the time in this one. But the short version is, down here you've got higher thermal expansion. Up here you've got lower thermal expansion. So as you take a glaze, say it's down here, and you move it up, you are reducing the thermal expansion, and in a traditional porcelain, that should give you better fit. Okay? In a bone china, I can't say what direction it should move you, but you should be able to even find a glaze, find out where it is on Stull, put it on a bone china, and then alter it accordingly, and you should be able to manipulate your way out of crazing. Okay? Because it's the same condition of, you find out what the glaze is, you look at its inherent properties, what's its flux ratio, what's its silica alumina ratio, and then you alter certain components while keeping the others the same. The number one thing to alter is not on, here we go, is if you've got a glaze with a specific silica to alumina ratio, the best thing you can do to keep the performance of that glaze is to raise the silica and alumina levels while keeping the ratio the same. Okay, so what you'd say is, say you're on this 7-to-1 line, but you're down here and you're crazing. If you alter your chemistry and move it up here, you should be able to alleviate crazing and keep the basic visual appearance of the glaze the same.
Okay. I think actually, no, and it's not usually crazing. It's usually dunting that's such an issue. It literally pulls the bone china apart. Yeah.
Now, is it shivering where you get just chunks of glaze and clay that come off, or is it dunting where the body fails straight?
It's dunting. For me, my experience, it's dunting where it will literally just split it. You know, it'll stress fracture it right through. It's not separating. I don't have it where it shivers off. It will often tear the piece into two.
That is a severe thermal expansion mismatch, and I think I would need to look at some more formulas to define it more extensively because I don't have the thermal expansion data on bone china.
Okay, and I do have one that works, and I'll plug that in and I'll share that with you, and that will probably have a lot of information. But I mean, I was talking to people a lot about it in the fall, and that, you know, they said that they had been doing a lot of development with that and just having a really, really hard time getting things to fit. Yeah.
Well, bone china
or not, yeah.
Bone china is a trip. I mean, it's barely clay. For those of you guys who don't know, the formula for bone china, I don't remember whether I talked about it in class, is basically 25% clay, 50% calcined cattle bones, and 25% feldspar, generally a sodium feldspar. So it's highly vitrified. It's all glass. It's almost impossible to form in any way except slip casting. Are you slip casting it?
I was both slip casting and doing a little bit of hand building, but it's beastly to work with. It's
when you're working with a plastic
brutal.
clay, right? Plastic clay, you need 50% clay content, clay mineral, to be able to shape by hand. But in bone china, you're limited to 25%. The short version is kaolin turns to mullite, and mullite is a mineral that will diffract light and reduce translucency. So what bone china does is you just use enough clay, kaolin, to keep the particles sticking together, but you can't build with it because there's so little clay. Or it's hard. It's not that you can't.
It's hard. Yeah.
So most people will slip cast with it because you don't care about the plastic property, and so it'll just take the shape of the mold, and you just hope it survives the kiln.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I mean, send me a glaze and we'll see,
Okay.
and you know, Google around, see if you can find thermal expansion numbers for a bone china.
Okay, I'll do that.
I've never run one, and we can figure it out. It's not that hard.
Okay, thanks.
Any other questions? I still have a few. I haven't even answered the ones from.
Well, Matt, I had one that I sent in, and you said bring it here.
Yes.
It was the one that Clay had brought up the idea of limits, I think, in one of the first two classes. And when you showed the Stull slide with, you had, I think it was cone 04 or cone 6, then cone 10 and cone 12.
Yeah, it's cone 6. I'm pulling it up right now. Give me 1 second.
To me, it sort of looked like you had, I mean, there were lines there that you could actually say were kind of limits as far as the amount of, yeah, there it is.
So your question, just to fill everybody else in, was sort of, you know, I say that limits don't work when you look at this random collection of limits, and here I am presenting limits. Is that the basic gist of it?
Yeah.
So it's a fascinating interpretation. Limits, how do I phrase this and not sound like a hypocrite? Limits do exist because chemistry exists, but what those limits are fluid, okay? Because the thing that you really have to contrast this concept with is this one, okay? Meaning, going back to Seeger's relationship of chemistry to temperature, and these again are the composition of Seeger cones. As we go up, we're inherently increasing temperature. When I draw that box, I'm just saying that for the most part, this will generally be the area where you can form a glaze without changing the flux ratio or without adding boron. That this level of silicon alumina will melt at a lower temperature. Okay? But it's just a general guideline. Because, again, going back to the previous slide, that's what Seeger tells us. As we increase silicon alumina content, we are inherently increasing the temperature, but temperatures are still flexible. Okay? Because notice, there's this box here that contains both cone 6 and cone 10. So why this is not a limit in the way I traditionally defined limits is because of the flexibility of the chemistry. I'm just saying in general this will melt at cone 6. But there are also things on Stull, if we come up to a blank Stull, that aren't really documented. And that is that this looks like, oh, if you just keep increasing silicon alumina, this is going to melt all day long. This is patently untrue, and I can actually show you that because of a great piece of data I had lost for a long time and just found the other day, which is this one. Okay, this is 1 second. There we go. These are Stull maps that I recreated using all of the different flux combinations. Okay, so these are all flux with calcium. This is lithium and calcium, sodium and calcium, and potassium and calcium. Now the thing that you'll notice is that basically you get the same trends. You get gloss through the middle, and then you get true matte glazes up here, and you get underfired here, and here, and here. And I know that the color maps don't really read quite as elegantly as Stull's map, but basically we know that these are true matte glazes because they're 5-to-1 to 3-to-1. But we also know that all of this is underfired. When we put all of these glazes in the SEM, they come out underfired. Why? Because there is a hard limit how much silicon alumina you can have in a glaze and have it melt at a specific temperature. Now, if we were to fire this, a glaze that's here, to a higher temperature, to cone 12 or 14, it absolutely would melt. Okay? And cones tell us that. Higher levels of cones, or higher temperature cones, have higher levels of silicon alumina. Okay? And I keep going. Here's magnesium. Shockingly enough, you get the same thing. You get a high peak in its central gloss region. Same thing. Here's strontium. Glossy middle, high peak. Peaking out at about 0.6 to 0.7 alumina. Okay, around that level, the glazes start to dry out. Is that a hard limit? No, it's flexible, because look, here we are with lithium, and it peaks at 0.5. And so it does come down to more interpretation of what is a functional region. And I would rather leave it open and not set a hard limit to then be able to use the map and understand the general parameters instead of just saying, here be dragons, do not enter, you know, all of that. Is that enough of an excuse? How do we test our glazes at the gloss meter? Okay, so wait, we had some more questions. Hold on, I did want to answer. There was Scott's. Now let's see. Bumkey had the question. Sorry, I'm just going to read this from my phone because I don't remember what it says. At the moment, I'm quite comfortable with the chemical analysis and to get the UMF, and I do understand how to change silica to alumina ratios to move the point on the map. However, I am still unclear about how to read the Stull map in relationship to cone numbers. When the UMF analysis provides a point on the map, how do I know that it is a cone 10 glaze? Can I consider anywhere inside the horseshoe area shape map a cone 10 glaze, even though the silica to alumina ratio in that area spans roughly 10-to-1 to 4-to-1? Are there any differences other than the texture in terms of characteristics in this area? Should I always try to move towards this 6-to-1 to 7-to-1? Actually, that was a great question to read because that's basically what we're just talking about. Oops, I don't want to open Outlook to see the email not working. Okay, so this comes down to exactly what we were just talking about, right? Again, looking at Stull, how do we know that this is the upper limit? It does come down to testing, but you have to use your new knowledge along with practical results. So say you design a glaze and it's got a 0.6 alumina level, but it's a 7:1, so it's 4.2 to 0.6, and you fire it to cone 10, and it looks dry. Is it underfired? Yes. You can now identify that because your alumina level is too high, right, that this, if it looks underfired, it is inherently underfired. The same way I could look at that composition from Kelly and say, well, right, her original composition, her flux ratio is a little bit off. That doesn't bother me. Her alumina level is low. That doesn't bother me. Her boron level is low for firing to cone 6. And when I look at the 3 ways of getting to cone 6, her flux ratio is in the wrong direction. Her alumina level is okay. Her silica level is okay. But this flux ratio is off. Okay, so you're looking for red flags and for trends. So to say that this is a matte glaze, but to know that she's at 6.3 to 1, goes, this is not a matte glaze. This is underfired, and the wrong flux ratio and the low boron level tell me that. Because this should be glossy. And the fact that it is not behaving as a glossy glaze means that there is something wrong with the chemistry, and the fact that there is low boron confirms that idea. Okay? So it comes down to sort of working with the detective work of our glazes. Now she asked something similar to what Vered was asking earlier about the flux, about trying to move to 7:1 ratios. You don't have to. There is nothing to say that you need to do that in the slightest. As to Scott's question just now, all of these numbers are flexible. Okay? Your flux ratio does not have to be perfectly 0.3 to 0.7. Okay? But you look for signposts that give you pause. Low boron levels. Radically altered flux ratios. Okay? So again, that 0.5 to 0.5 thing. Right? 0.5 to 0.5 is something to watch out for. Look for things that logically don't make sense using the logic that you now have from the UMF. Okay? Can you have a glossy glaze that's 6:1? Yeah. Can you have a glossy glaze that's 9:1? Yeah, that's what Vered had earlier. It's fine. Okay? 7:1 is ideal. 0.3 to 0.7 is ideal, but you can work within your ranges. Now hold on, we had some other questions on the message board that I said I would address, so give me 1 second. Oh good, no one's posted since we started class. Okay, Elke had a question here. Let me go back. Sorry, 1 second. Okay, Elke's question. Oh, okay, so it's still the same question. I understand pretty much everything you explain about how to calculate the UMF and reading the chart, except how can you see what cone you should fire at looking at the stall chart? So this is basically the same question of you're looking for signposts. What temperature am I trying to fire to? And then what conditions are meeting that temperature? Okay, are my silicon alumina levels low enough? Are my my glass former ratios right for matte glazes? All of those type of things. So I think we pretty much answered that one. And we've got one more I know from Paula. On the latter part of Lecture 10, you walked us through putting together a durable glaze by playing around with the known limits of the UMF calculator. Will you do this with a cone 6 glaze with the boron levels? Yes, I can do that really quickly. Again, sort of, well, I mean, we can look at Kelly's here. Of all you need to do, right, is to just make sure that you hit the correct limits. And we sort of already did this with Vered's formula. But we can do it from scratch real quick, unless everybody's falling asleep. Is everybody asleep? I can't see you. Okay. I'm going to stick with, well, I mean, actually, I already did it, you guys. Oh, I did it when I was answering Kiara's question here. I mean, you put together, whenever you're starting with a glaze, okay, and I mean, we can actually do this from the start. if you're going to build a glaze from scratch, it's actually really simple. Pick your fluxes. Pick your fluxes based on texture. Pick your fluxes based on what glaze response you want. We'll get into that stuff next week. But it's very easy. Pick your fluxes and then balance your flux ratio. So in this case, I just entered the Nef-Psi and the whiting until I got a 0.3 to 0.7.
We can't see it.
Oh, you can't? Oh, sorry.
We're looking at you again.
Oh, nobody wants to see me. Sorry. I know you guys have to look at me too much. I feel sorry for you. I apologize. I wish I was prettier. Okay. So this is what I had started earlier for Kiara's question. Okay. I just picked two fluxes, literally Nef-Psi and whiting, and I just enter amounts. Okay. And I mean, I know it works, so except when Excel freezes up. So I randomly enter 60% Nef-Psi and 30% Flint, and I just happen to get 0.3 to 0.7 because, you know, I'm lucky like that. I'm then going to pick a source of boron for cone 6, okay, and then I'm going to introduce that. I'm going to go with the Gerstley borate, and we already know from talking with Kiara that we want to get this at 20%. Okay, now we've got our 0.14. I mean, I can futz with this again. I can make this 21. Okay, now I'm at 0.15 boron. Now my flux ratio has changed a little bit. I could leave it, or I can go back and tweak it. I can make my 30, 25, make that 24. Now I'm at back 0.3 to 0.7. My boron level has gone up because I've changed my flux ratio. So again, take that down to 20, take it down to 19, and there we go. I'm at 0.3 to 0.7, and I've got my boron level at 0.15. Now, technically, this is a matte cone 6 glaze. There you go. Have fun with that. My alumina level's low, my silica level's low, but I'm at a 5 to 1. You know, it's fine. I do need clay, so I'm going to add in my 10% clay just to keep it suspended. And actually, it became an even more matte glaze. So this is actually pretty cool. So anybody want a cone 6 matte glaze? Quick, write this down.
But it's not actually 10% clay.
Yeah, it's close enough. I mean, yeah, you want it to go 12, 11, 11.5. There you go. Close enough. Good enough for you? So here you go. Here's a cone 6 matte glaze. Easy peasy lemon squeezy. Okay. Now, if I wanted to make this a glossy glaze, just add in Flint. 10, 20, 30, 25, 26, 27, 28. I mean, I'm just dialing it in until it gets to 7 to 1. I could have stopped anywhere along that line, and it would have been a glossy glaze. So here's the same glaze as a glossy glaze. So we've got the matte, we've got the gloss, we've got cone 6, and we've got stability. Thumbs up all around.
Isn't your clay low again?
Yeah, 8%'s not that big. You want it over 5%. But, you know, you want the clay level to come up again, that's fine. 14, close enough. Add in some more Flint again, 30. There you go. You know, you can just keep moving it around, because the thing to remember about the map, what the map tells us, is that silica and alumina levels in proportion control temperature and texture, as long as your flux ratios are set. So you can manipulate silica and alumina through the clay and Flint all day long and get lots of different glaze results. Get rid of crazing, make it matte, make it gloss, raise the melting temperature, lower the melting temperature, and you don't have to touch the Nef-Psi whiting or Gerstley borate. And you can create the map with just these variations. You know, it's such a powerful tool. I mean, I don't mean to come across about flip about it, but you know, it's just because I do this a lot. You know, that I know how to dial it in exactly, but you know, it works. Hey, you want to change it? You want to make Nef-Psi, or instead you want a whiting, you want to make it barium. You know, you just take this, you substitute that out for barium, and then you increase your levels. 30, 40, 50. Oops. 50, 48. So now we're at 0.3 to 0.7. We've got barium now as our RO. Okay, our silica and alumina levels, our boron levels, they're all exactly the same. Okay, now you want a barium matte at cone 04 because you want crazy colors and soft textures. So we take that flint out, and now you've got a beautiful barium matte at cone 6. I shouldn't have, did I say cone 04 just now? I meant cone 6. I mean, I say, oh, it's just that easy. Believe me, this has taken me 20 years of manipulation to learn how to do, but I mean, it's just knowing what signposts you're looking for and how to move the glaze around. And again, that this example from Kelly, right, that they're, same glaze, different colorants, but really hates focusing. Oh, that's a nice texture if you can show it. Because Stull works. That's the whole reason why these two glazes exist. Same glaze, more silica, which again will blow people's minds. If you're like hanging out in the common studio and you say, oh, hey, I want to turn my matte glaze glossy, add silica, or I want to turn my glossy glaze matte, take out silica, it will melt many people's brains because they don't logically consider how Stull works and how chemistry relates to the map. But this is the ultimate confirmation. Cone 6, glossy matte. Literally more silica. That's the only difference. The chemistry on these two, besides the colorant, is exactly the same. Okay, it's a huge, it's a huge thing to take under. It's a lot to absorb. It's going to take a lot of play and a lot of proof for you in your own studio to show that it works, but it works. Trust me. Now everybody looks sleepy. Oh.
Now I have a software question for you.
Okay, absolutely.
Which will go and show you my ignorance about how software works because I never got into that stuff. Yeah. So I noticed that in this and in the antiquated form of hyperglaze I have, you're always dinking around with the materials. And then it changes your ratios up above. Why is this not a two-way formula whereby you would change your ratios up above and it would automatically change your levels down below?
Hold on one second.
That would take a lot more computing power.
Nope.
Well, yeah, but that's available.
It doesn't. Hold on.
You wouldn't have a unique solution.
No, I've already got the question answered. I just have to find it. Where is it? Hold on, I gotta search something because it's somewhere. I got too many files. Oops, gotta spell it right. And I need my. Why is my computer freezing up? Documents. So the question is, can you make a piece of software that does UMF to batch and batch to UMF? Nope, that's the wrong one. Shoot. Let me come over here. And the answer is absolutely you can. It just doesn't work as nicely. And in fact, my mentor, Dr. Carty, only uses the other type of calculator, but I don't like the way it works. Okay, so
is that a function of poor design or a poor concept?
It's the function of the way the chemistry works, and I'll show you why here in a second. Okay, so here's the calculator as we know it. You plug in a formula, and it gives you the UMF. What Phyllis is asking about is this, okay? And this is Dr. Carty's preferred method of the calculator, where you plug in a UMF. So we'll make this, let's say we want a 7-to-1, or no, let's say we want a 4-to-1 formula. So we're going to make this, we'll leave that at 3.5. We'll make this 0.3. Whoops, that's the wrong way. 0.5, so then we need to take this down to 2. Okay. So in this calculator, you literally plug in the UMF that you want, and it spits out the glaze. Okay. there are many, many problems with the way that this works. And the number one problem is that you can end up with negative materials, okay, which does not work from an actual standpoint. Now let me see, how can I make this? I have not used this one in so long, I forget how to make it negative. Oh, no, I just do this. 1, 5.
There you go.
There we go.
Yeah.
Okay. So I want that 0.5 to 0.5, 0.3 to 0.7. And then has that been... it's been so long since I've done this. 0.1. Oh, no. Yeah. Oh, that's why. Okay. This here, I just delete that. Okay. So what you... Oh, no, that didn't do it either. 1. Yeah. Jeez, it's been so long since I've had to mess with this one. But basically, what it does is that it looks at the UMF, but you very quickly become limited as to trying to blend materials, trying to hit the flux ratios. And Dr. Carty loves this version of the calculator. This is all he uses. But I just find that it's much more intuitive, and it gives me a lot more flexibility with using multiple materials together and blending things together. And if I could remember how to make this negative.
You had a negative before you deleted it.
Yeah.
No, a negative down here, not up here.
There was one time you did, and then it
really
disappeared. Was? Yeah. Mm-hmm.
0.3, 0.2.
Stop.
Right here.
There.
Oh, there we go. Okay. Right. Okay, absolutely. Good catch. Yeah, it wants me to add negative 15% soda ash. Right? I can't do that because it's trying to get me to get to this ideal UMF level. Okay? And it just can't. Now, that said, there are very specific limits with composing batch to UMF. Okay? And this is that the upper left-hand corner of Stull, this corner here, you notice how this is blank? There's no results here? Because it is physically impossible to compose these glazes along with these glazes down here with the materials that we use. Because as soon as you bring in a feldspar, you're bringing in massive amounts of lumina, but you're also bringing in massive amounts of silica. So it instantly pushes you from trying to get here automatically over here. Okay, which is why this area is completely blank and this area is completely blank, because they are physically impossible to create. Now, you can do things like to make these glazes down here. You can use soda ash and pearl ash, but we've talked about the perilous nature of those. But that will technically get you down here. The interesting thing is, and I don't think I talked about this in a lecture yet, a very tricky thing to understand is that let's look at just a combination real quick of a feldspar, and I'll just pick G200 and I'll pick whiting. As soon as I try to balance this at 0.3 to 0.7, okay, I'm just going to come in here and do whatever it takes to get these balanced. Whoops. 20, 22. Okay. These two are now balanced. Okay, and this is a glaze. This is a full-on glaze. I've got my 0.3 to 0.7. I've got a statistically relevant alumina level and a silica level and a silica to alumina ratio. Okay, it's not ideal, but it's fine. This is a glaze. This is also as low of an alumina level as I can create with a feldspar. Okay, this is literally the lowest point on Stull. 0.33 and 2.0, if I come back to Stull, okay, 0.33 and 2.0. This is actually the lowest point you can create on Stull using a feldspar and a carbonate. So that means you can draw a line, you can draw a line up from here, and you can draw a line over, and you can create any of those. But all of this is out. All of this is out because the materials limit us thusly. And what the other calculator was doing was it was trying to make a glaze that doesn't exist over here because it violates the natural limits of the material.
Can you post that calculator for us to play with?
I think it's already in the... should be in the one that's up there.
Okay.
Because I think it should be the master calculator that's posted. If it's not, let me know, and I'll post it. Yeah, you can play with it. Because the other thing to note is, so you can manipulate this by, say, going to NEFSI, right? Because NEFSI has a greater concentration of RO. Then we balance it again, 30. NEFSI still only brings us down to an alumina level of 0.3 and a silica level of 1.43. So again, coming back to Stahl, 0.3, 1.43. So with NEFSI, our lowest corner is right here. Okay, so everything down here you have to use carbonates to get to, okay, which is not good. It can be done, but it's not good. Okay, and so that's one of the challenges of dealing with our materials the way we do.
It's not there. I just checked.
Okay. As I go out of focus, well, I'll post it when we're done. Do we have more questions? I knew tonight would be an epic session. Once we get into the UMF, everybody starts to ponder all the possibilities.
We were talking about how boron works today, I think. It's a low-temperature glass former. Does it behave like a flux because it becomes fluid sooner, and atoms can move around in the fluid?
Yes, essentially yes.
Okay.
And that's the whole thing of it's not exactly a flux, it's not exactly because it is forming a glass on its own. But when that glass matrix exists, as it comes into contact with other materials, it will induce them to melt. Just like the same way that if you have water in a bucket full of ice cubes, the ice cubes will melt faster.
So it's doing what, I guess, feldspar does, just on a different scale, kind of. Temperature scale.
Yeah, but that's where the whole...
When you talk about the liquid forming?
Right. Yes, it does. This is where it's such a gray area. And I'm not one to fall on a technicality. I'm just slightly defensive about boron because I've spent 10 years trying to exactly get where boron is. And for many of those years, I got this boron is a flux. And, you know, the short version of the history is for years, we tried to put boron into the flux ratio and try to make that work. And shockingly enough, it doesn't work. And we spent years, and it sounds so dumb, flailing all this way of going, it doesn't work in the flux ratio. And then going, okay, it has to be an independent glass former, and how do we account for it? Now, actually, to Phyllis's question about Hyperglaze, Hyperglaze is old glaze software if you're not familiar with it. What it will often do is it will give you the silica and alumina plus boron flux ratio, or glass former ratio. Ignore that. Don't go anywhere near it, okay? Because I tried to do that for years, and it still doesn't work. What I found is when you consider your boron level as independent, and then look at your silica to alumina ratios as you would consider in Stahl, then you can define temperature. You can redefine Stahl at temperature. Okay, so by using, where is it? By using this map, hold on, by using this map to define the boron level that you need, okay, you will define your melting temperature, and then you just apply Stahl at that temperature. You just say, okay, I've got this much boron, then Stahl applies at this temperature. Okay? And the only variation I have found in that is that at Cone 04, the matte line seems to be at a 4-to-1 ratio instead of a 5-to-1 ratio. But that's the only variation I found. At Cone 6, the matte line is still the same. You know, at any other temperature, it seems like it's still the same. And that was, to me, the moment of clarity of trying to break away from these notions of, oh, no, it's silica divided by boron and alumina, or, you know, any of those types of variations. when it's just that independent boron level, and then you can redefine at any temperature. What your flux sources are don't matter. That your glass former ratios, all that stays the same. Matte, gloss, it all stays the same at any temperature.
Yeah, just when you said that, I was thinking in terms of the becoming a liquid and just the mechanism itself, I guess.
Yeah, and that's a physical chemistry question, and chemists use this all the time in determining the purity of a substance. So if you have substance A with melting point A, and you mix it with material B that has melting point B, you will get a mixed melting point that is lower than either of the two.
That's the eutectic.
Well, technically the eutectic is actually the absolute lowest temperature a combination of materials will melt at. That is literally what a eutectic is, but it's often thought of as this notion of a new lower temperature, yes.
Right.
But yeah, is it an actual flux? I mean, yeah, it's really acting as a flux. Because it is literally not a flux, I just hesitate to use that term, but you can effectively think of it as a temperature-defining flux. But boron is also material that forms a glass all on its own. Doesn't need any silica. It will make a glass just fine on its own.
So it's a unique in a way.
Well, it is and it isn't. I mean, the whole thing is, when we look at that glass-forming periodic table, I'm just pulling up the periodic table, that we actually have a lot of different glass formers, right, that are available to us.
Why don't we use other ones?
Mostly because silica is 35%, or was it 35% of the Earth? It's just so predominant that the rest of them are irrelevant. Now, that doesn't mean that we don't use them at all. Okay, that these are the glass formers. Boron is a full-on glass former. Silicon, phosphorus. We were just talking about bone china. Bone china is calcium phosphate, and we are actually using that phosphorus as a glass former. Okay, arsenic, germanium, and antimony. They're all glass formers on their own, as well as vanadium. But we have so much silica. The Earth is full of silica. Clay is based in silica. It just becomes the default material because it is literally the #1 material on the crust of the Earth. And we have all these different forms, specifically clay, feldspar, and quartz, and so we developed a system that works with those. You can make glasses with many of these. Boron glasses are common in glass science. Going back to the original Pyrex, which is the brand name, was a borosilicate glass, mostly meaning boron and silicon, but that boron, it works great. It's much more limited. I mean, the problems we have with boron to this day are because there's basically one source in the U.S., which is literally the town of Boron, California, and U.S. Borax owns that town. So if you want boron, you got to go through U.S. Borax. The second problem is that most of the sources we have are water soluble unless they've been converted into a frit, which makes it expensive. Because borax, the mineral, boric acid, the mineral, they're water soluble. Guernsey borate isn't, but Guernsey borate now has limited availability. But yeah, you can make a glass with any of these on their own if you've got a high enough concentration. Silicon is just common, and it's easy. We understand it real well. Not that we don't understand the other materials. Those are just like, we're on it.
Arsenic glass just has a certain ring to it.
It does, doesn't it? Oh, you want to be dangerous, Clay. May I play with fire, literally. I've never seen an arsenic glass, actually. I mean, I know that they exist, but I've never seen one. All I know is it's time for me to get a new webcam. Seriously. Oh, really, Sophie? Sophie the dog wants out. Sophie, you want to come say hi? Come here, Sophie. Sophie. Oh, out of focus passive hound. I won't pick her up. It'll make her grumpy. Hold on one second. I think we're almost done. Any other questions?
One last thing on the paper. Do you have any particular expectation as to how we focus on a topic? Mine is fairly broad, and I spent a fair bit of time looking at the geology. Is that?
I think that's great. I think
That's fine.
Information is always good. Finding a lot of what I would consider relevant information for a lot of these topics is sketchy, and you have to go to a lot of the regular sources, or you have to branch out into a geology textbook or a chemistry textbook or any. Yes, I know. Hold on. Girl's got to pee. Hold on. I'll be right back. Okay. Go. She's going to be back in 10 seconds because it's cold out there. Yeah, I mean, whatever. My grading practices are real liberal, so.
And size, mine's leaked into, I think, maybe 4.5, close to 5.
I never have a problem with information.
Okay.
It's all digital, so I'm not worried about wasting trees. It just makes one big file, which I'll take everybody's and collate them and put them into one big file and post that.
All right.
Any other questions? I mean, I'm more than happy to hang out, but I don't want to put everybody to sleep.
Just in the last lecture, you said about the 3 board subs that are not working well.
Oh, Red, my computer just froze up, so you're going to have to repeat that.
Just board sub. So you said they are not working well enough.
I'm sorry, I don't understand the question.
The Gershly board,
Mm-hmm.
the substitute.
Oh. Don't use the substitutes. Because true Gershly borate is currently available, just use that. Unless you're really stuck with the substitutes.
Okay, so they still sell it. Okay.
Yes, it has become available again. I mentioned at the end of that lecture that when I went to the Gershly borate mine, there was a mountain of it that had been extracted and was sitting out there in Death Valley. And to my understanding, Laguna bought that mountain and has been grinding it and selling it themselves. They are not, and I highly doubt they will be able to, but it sounds like they've got a fairly large stock from that mountain of Gershly that they are selling.
But you think when that mountain's gone, it's gone?
It's gone. The mine was literally, I mean, old-timey prospector scary. It was a major health and safety violation, and considering that Laguna has zero experience in mining operations, and the expenditure, I mean, the whole reason why I was on the project is because US Borex brought us in to do an estimate on what the market would be for Artis if they brought it back as an open pit mine. You know, we said you'd probably make $1 million a year, and they said, oh, that's nice, we're not going to do anything. Because that's just, it's not enough for the expenditure to open it as that kind of mine. And there's no, unless they want to start selling it to North Korea. Does anyone have any connections in North Korea? Because they detonated an underground hydrogen bomb last night, and so they need some Gershly borate. So except for the treason part of it, there's money to be made. If you want to go out with the shovel and some trucks and send a boat to Pyongyang. Yeah, no, it's gone. There are some substitutes. There's some colemanite out there. There is some Turkish ulexite that occasionally comes around. CaddyCal is a pretty decent product, but I got to talk to my friends at Plainsman again because I'm not quite sure. They seem to have the control of it, and it seems to come and go. But again, Gershly, it's great, but the whole problem, I think, why the Gershly freakout happened goes back to the fact that people just do not really understand Cone 6. And they had so relied on what Chiara was saying of, oh, add 10% Gershly, and boom, Cone 6. Well, then when Gershly went away, everybody panicked because they didn't understand how that 10% Gershly was working, and they sure as hell didn't know how to fix it with a frit. And Gershly does have cool effects. It does have that double melting effect, and that's nice, but it's not it's not the be-all, end-all. You know, you're more than easy to do things without Gerstley. And I don't know. I mean, if any of you guys were around when Gerstley went away, I was in, and it was a panic. I mean, it was an absolute shitstorm. And all the alternatives came out, and none of them worked, and it was... Oof.
Hey, what do you know about this fruit that came from Mexico about that time? Campbell in Virginia was selling it. It's called Mexican fruit. And I mixed up a raku glaze with it, and I stuck my hand in the glaze, and there were the craziest looking crystals growing. I have some of them. I mean, they're just bizarre looking, but you know, about, I don't know, 1.5 inches long.
I never came across that one, but that does go to the fact that Fritz are water soluble, or especially they can be. I mean, actually, I was just talking with Walter Heath about that a couple of weeks ago, because the thing is, you know, when we look at the UMF of our Fritz real quick, okay, 3124. So I was just doing that whole talk about the stability of our raw materials, right? And that a 0.3 to 0.7 with the prescribed boron level is totally stable. Okay, so Frit 3124, if you can see that here, shocking enough, 0.3 to 0.7 prescribed boron level for cone 04, and it's fine, great. Like it's a very, very stable Frit because it's a stable glass. Okay, as we go to 3195, we get a very similar condition, 0.3 to 0.7. It's a different boron level, but it's actually meant to be a slightly higher temperature Frit. So this is like cone 1. But 3195 and 3124 are exactly the same except for the boron level. The problem is when you get to 3110, okay, this sodium level is through the roof. And I was talking with Walter, who was making a clay body out of 3110, and he says to me one day, he's like, well, I went into my studio and this morning, and all of my clay that I'd let out to dry had crystals growing on it. And I said, yeah, Walter, of course it did, because you're putting 3110 in there, and the 3110 dissolves, because this is inherently a poor glass structure. Low alumina, low boron, high sodium. And this is that problem. This is why I get on about the flux ratios. Having a 0.5 to 0.5 plus or minus 0.1 is bad. Okay. In fact, it's
that weird glaze I showed.
The 3110.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They used to make a self-glazing clay. Back in the 80s, you know, you'd buy it and the stuff would precipitate out like that. So that must be how that was done.
Oh, well, actually, I had a student who did that last year. She wanted to look at Egyptian paste, right? So we started looking at that. And all that is that it's not special. It's just got a ton of soda ash in it. Yeah. And then the soda ash precipitates on the surface and fires into sodium silicate, which is a weak glass. And the fascinating thing that I did with her is we took out all the copper, you know, that's just a colorant, and we just started adding sodium into a normal clay body, and she got self-glazing clays at cone 10. Because all you need to do is put enough sodium in there, and it dissolves in the water and then precipitates on the surface, and boom, it glazes itself. Because yeah, if you overload it, but again, this is why too much sodium, too much alkali metal is a problem. It's one of the big unspoken problems out there. You know, it's the reason why glaze durability is bad. Full stop. Okay, going back, you know, real quick to this, right? You know, I was mentioning how it was a question between Cardi and myself as to whether this hump of 0.5 to 0.5 having even worse performance. And I actually believe at this point that this is actually completely true. That 0.5 to 0.5 has worse performance than any other variable because it's at the perfect level where you've got too much R2O flux, and if it's not tied up, then it will overreact and it will still be susceptible to acids and bases. Whereas if you're here, you've got your perfect flux ratio and it's balanced, and here you've got so much R2O that it's melting even more glass. But this is in a place where there's not enough to melt glass, but there is enough that it just hangs around. I really think that 0.5 to 0.5 is the devil as far as fluxes go. It just, skull and crossbones do not enter. And maybe I'm paranoid, but, that doesn't mean they're not out to get me. Any other questions? Everybody looks all sleepy and snuggly. It's a cold winter's night, except those of you in California. Let's see, who of you isn't it cold here for? Phyllis, you're in the Pacific Northwest. Scott, you're
We're wet
cold.
and chilly.
Yeah, wet. Oh, you guys have had snow. I don't even have snow yet. Oh, and there goes Sophie the dog.
It's cold here.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I mean, it's
cold
like.
here.
Where are you, Rebecca?
I'm in Michigan.
Michigan. Oh yeah, Michigan will be cold. That's right.
Yeah. Oh, it warmed up like 7 degrees today, so I didn't have to worry about frostbite on the way to school.
Well, I got to take the dog out for a walk. It's 27 here right now, but like I said, I'm in southern Pennsylvania now. I'm not in Alfred, so I have to go up to Alfred next week or the week after. I'm not looking forward to it.
I saw you wearing a Gettysburg shirt. Is that where you are?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm actually halfway between Gettysburg and York.
Okay, well, you're 2 hours from where I am, I guess.
Oh, really? You're that close?
I'm just an hour south of Winchester on the 81 corridor.
Oh, okay.
In
Yeah, that's
Newmarket.
like my niece goes to school in.
JMU?
Yeah.
That's 20 minutes from here.
Oh.
I work with a lot of their student teachers.
Oh, okay, cool.
Program, so
Yeah.
yeah, it's close by.
Oh, cool. Small world. Yeah, no, my wife, there's she was hired by Doll Tile, and they have a factory here in Gettysburg. 2 factories, actually. So she used to run a tile factory up in Hornell, which is the town next to Alfred, and then she got recruited by the big guys. So we moved down here. I take care of the kids, do research, teach online, stay out of trouble. But I still go to Alfred 3 times a semester, and unfortunately the semester starts in 2 weeks, so I have to go back. They draw me back in. I try to be like, no, I can do it all online. I'm fine. I don't have to go to Alfred. And they still want me to show up. It's like the teachers that actually expect you to have an attendance record. They don't just trust you. Okay, there goes Sophie. So any other questions for tonight?
I'm good.
Right. Good.
Okay.
Thank you.
Bye, everybody. Thank
Bye.
you. I'll see you all next week.
Ah.
Thanks.